Thank you for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Ephraim Graham.
And I'm Charlene Israel. Secretary of State John Kerry is traveling to Ukraine for meetings on Tuesday about the country's turmoil. Meanwhile, President Obama is working the phones. He has spoken with Russian President Vladimir Putin, whose troops have taken over a ferry terminal on the easternmost tip of Crimea. That is a common departure point for many Russian-bound ships. There are reports Russian soldiers have occupied airports and surrounded military bases in Crimea. Our senior international reporter George Thomas is in the region with the very latest.
The area in southern Ukraine known as Crimea now belongs to Russian President Vladimir Putin.
What has already happened is a brazen act of aggression.
Within hours of the orders, Putin's forces invaded and took complete control of the Crimean airspace, airports, highways, ports, and regional government, without a single shot fired yet.
We are on the brink of the disaster.
Crimea is of huge significance to Russia. The Russian Black Sea Naval Fleet is located here.
But Putin's ambitions go beyond the Crimean Peninsula. His next target could be eastern Ukraine. Over the weekend, pro-Russian demonstrators took control of key government buildings in several regions, replacing European Union flags with Russian ones, and called for union with Moscow.
We want Russia to hand out Russian passports to citizens who want them.
Ukraine accuses Moscow of orchestrating the takeover to justify an even wider invasion. 45 million people live in Ukraine. Nearly 8 million of them are ethnic Russians. Putin claims the new Ukrainian government installed after the ouster of Viktor Yanukovych is fascist and will persecute ethnic Russians. Putin says it's his job to protect them.
We want to live in peace, but we need security from Russia.
The crisis is even dividing some families.
Putin is not going to leave us alone. My sisters in Russia are offended at me and are yelling at me not to speak ill of their president. But I say to them, then your president shouldn't touch us.
For many Russians, Ukraine is viewed as part of the motherland. So when thousands of Ukrainians took to the streets 103 days ago demanding closer ties to Europe and the West, Putin wasn't too happy about it. Russia hasn't recognized the new pro-Western government in Kiev, and most experts believe Moscow will try anything to make sure it fails. This weekend, Ukraine's new but unstable government put the country on a war footing, ordering up all military reservists to active duty. This as Russian troops urge Ukrainian soldiers to lay down their weapons and pledge allegiance to Russia. George Thomas, CBN News, on the Crimean Peninsula.
George has just returned from Crimea and joins us now from Kiev. George, how difficult will it be for Kiev to reestablish control in Crimea?
Ephraim, it's going to be very, very difficult. Here's the scenario. The Russians have about 850,000 troops on their side of the border. Ukraine has about 150,000 of them. Half of them are conscripts. There are between 10 to 15,000 Russian troops already in the Crimean Peninsula with various Russian warships surrounding the Crimea. It is absolutely impossible for the Ukrainians to retake Crimea at the moment.
How serious are the pro-Russian demonstrators in eastern Ukraine?
Look, I think that's the next target for Russia and Vladimir Putin. I mean, in the last 48 to 72 hours, there have been thousands of pro-Russian demonstrators on the streets of major key regions across the eastern portion of the country. And the majority, remember, the majority of the eastern part of Ukraine is predominantly pro-Russian. And so the accusation that the Ukrainians are making is that Moscow is fomenting these demonstrations to justify, in essence, to go in and to take those areas in control, take them over for Russia.
Real quickly, what's the United States and European Union doing to counter these Russian advances?
Look, there's nothing that the United States, NATO, or the EU can do. Secretary John Kerry is heading here to Kiev tomorrow morning, but really they can't. The only thing they can do at the moment is shore up the economic strength of the interim Ukrainian government and to try to make that foundation stable. For clearly, this is an interim government that has, in some cases, lost its legitimacy. It is weak and unstable. And so the only thing they can do, short of a military intervention, which is almost impossible, is to try to strengthen the economic foundation.
All right, George Thomas reporting for us. Thank you so much for your time, George.
You're welcome.
Here at home, 100 million Americans are facing a massive mid-Atlantic winter storm today. It's already canceled 2,000 flights and prompted New Jersey to declare a state of emergency. And the nation's capital is shut down. Heather Sells has the latest on this fast-moving storm.
The country's midsection has already taken a beating. On Sunday, freezing rain and heavy snow pelted many central and eastern states. Crews have struggled to de-ice planes at airports and clear roads. In Oklahoma, lightning and hail struck. And ice caused a 40-car pileup in Oklahoma City.
This car over here, it was just sliding, and they asked if I could reverse. I couldn't even reverse, because if I reversed, then I'd hit this car in front of me.
I threw it in four-wheel drive, and even with four-wheel drive, I was spinning.
In Missoula, Montana, a massive avalanche over the weekend buried 3 people. A town-wide search and rescue went to work and found all 3 alive.
He just said there's an 8-year-old buried underneath some snow. There was an avalanche. Grab a shovel.
Forecasters say today's latest blast of winter will hit the mid-Atlantic with anywhere from 6 to 12 inches of snow. Cities have tried to prepare. Baltimore brought in 20,000 tons of salt, and the power company warned customers to brace for outages.
Ice is really the most detrimental to our electric system, and so we do have crews, an increased number of crews stationed throughout the entire service territory.
Thousands in Arkansas and Tennessee are already without power, and school children in multiple states from Texas to Pennsylvania will stay home today, all thanks to our latest winter weather.
I'm Paul Strand reporting from Washington, where the overnight rain is over and the day's sleet and snow has begun. Much of the work has come to a halt because an emergency has been declared here in D.C. Most employees told to stay home. Many wouldn't be able to get here anyway because several train and bus services have ground to a halt. Now, for hours, an icy sleet, or sort of a sleety ice, fell here, and it's about to get sealed to power lines and tree branches and pipes by a half foot of snow or more. And then the wind's going to pick up to about 20-25 miles an hour. And that's just about perfect for knocking out power or knocking down tree branches. Before all this began, several hours of rain poured down, which made it almost impossible for road crews to salt and prepare these roads here in a city that boasts one of the worst commutes in the country, which is why some are saying this could be one of the most painful storms in a winter that's already seen so much bad weather. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from wet, wet Washington.
And thank you, Paul. President Obama and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are meeting today to discuss Palestinian peace talks, Iran, and other topics. Netanyahu opposes the U.S. nuclear agreement with Iran and is asking for more international sanctions. Netanyahu has also vowed to stand steadfast on Israeli interests in the face of heavy international pressure to make concessions to the Palestinians. President Obama said in a Bloomberg News interview, if Netanyahu does not believe a peace deal is the right thing for Israel, then he needs to articulate an alternative approach.
The fight over land has long been the cause of conflict between Israel and Palestine. Now a new documentary looks to answer the question, whose land is it? Chris Mitchell explains from Jerusalem.
Israel Indivisible. The case for the ancient homeland highlights Israel's latest challenge.
The world media has joined the Islamic campaign to extinguish Jewish history as part of their effort to delegitimize and destroy the Jewish state.
The film lays out a compelling and comprehensive case for Israel's right to the land.
The evidence for Israel is overwhelming. From archaeological science to historical records to biblical scriptures to political resolutions and laws, there should be no dispute as to the rights of the Jewish people to all the land the Roman Empire called Palestine.
The producers chose to premiere the film in a symbolic site here in Ariel, the center of Israel's biblical heartland. At the Holy Land premiere, the film's producers presented the film's motive.
The goal is to educate Christians, to bring this message, because the message is being distorted and there's lies being propagated about Israel and this whole Middle East conflict. I feel like what we're doing at PJTN is just coming alongside, God's biblical narrative and telling a story that nobody seems to want to tell. And then, you know, of course, using the film, using the program to mobilize Christians to action, to stand with our Jewish brethren.
Many Jews believe disinformation is one of the main weapons against the Jewish state.
The first step in, God forbid, the physical destruction of the state of Israel is the intellectual destruction, undermining the whole reason for being of the Jewish state, or the legitimacy.
The film unmasks some common misconceptions in this disinformation campaign, like the term West Bank.
Well, why is it called the West Bank? It's called the West Bank because when Jordan, basically in 1948, when they took it over, they called it the West Bank of their country, the West Bank of the Jordan River. They named it the West Bank. You know, for centuries and for, forever, it's been called Judea and Samaria.
Many see the film as a tool to give Israel supporters the facts they need in this battle.
And if they don't have the facts at hand, they become apologetic. The minute they become apologetic, they lose the argument. They need to be knowledgeable. Once they're knowledgeable, they'll be able to stand up for what's right.
Spiro sees information as the first line of defense, not only for Israel, but the West.
It's not only threatening Israel, it's threatening the whole foundation of Western civilization even. Movies like this that present information and facts are the most basic and powerful tool we have for not just the case for Israel, but for the case for truth.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Ariel, Israel.
A group of 10 terrorists slashed at least 29 people to death with knives and machetes at a train station in southern China. Another 143 people were wounded in the weekend attack. Chinese police shot and killed at least 4 of the attackers, but said another 5 were on the loose. Authorities blame Muslim separatists for the massacre. The Uyghur people in western China have been fighting to break away and establish their own country. In past years, Uyghurs have used other terrorist tactics like a suicide car attack.
The Walt Disney Company is cutting funding to the Boy Scouts of America because of its ban on gay leaders. Beginning in 2015, Disney will halt all donations to the group. The Boy Scouts lifted its policy on gay youth last year, but a ban on gay adult leaders remains. Disney does not give money directly to the Boy Scouts, but donates money in exchange for volunteer hours. The company has given small grants to local troops and PACs. A Scouts spokesman said the decision will affect the organization's ability to serve children.
The film Son of God was a huge success at the box office this weekend, earning $26.5 million, finishing opening weekend in a close second behind Nonstop. Analysts say with numbers like these, Hollywood is sure to make more religious movies. 2 more Bible stories are hitting theaters this year. Noah, starring Russell Crowe, opens later this month, and Christian Bale will play Moses in Exodus, opening in December.
Coming up, North Korea jails another foreign Christian. What's the secret strategy behind this string of arrests?
Radical Islamist rebels in the Syrian city of Raqqa are forcing Christians to pay for protection. The Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham published the terms on the internet. Christians must pay the protection tax twice a year, convert to Islam, or face the sword. In return, the Christians will be allowed to worship privately, keep their own cemeteries, and have their own clergy. But sharing their faith or publicly displaying the cross is forbidden. They also will not be allowed to rebuild damaged or destroyed churches.
North Korea has arrested another Christian missionary. This time it's a 50-year-old Baptist from South Korea. Senior international correspondent Gary Lane has more on this new wave of persecution.
South Korean Kim Jong-uk is one of 3 Christian missionaries now imprisoned in North Korea. He joins American Kenneth Bae, jailed in November 2012, and 75-year-old Australian John Short, arrested less than 2 weeks ago. The North Korean government paraded Kim, a Baptist missionary, before the media in Pyongyang Thursday, where he apologized for allegedly committing anti-state crimes.
I was thinking of turning North Korea into a religious country and destroying its present government and political system.
Eric Foley heads up the Colorado-based mission Seoul, USA. He says the North Korean regime intends to use the 3 imprisoned missionaries as bargaining chips to secure concessions from the West.
this is the beginning of what I think will be a sustained effort on the part of North Korea to try to achieve a certain kind of aid and a certain kind of understanding with populations around the world that they believe to be sympathetic. So they want to focus off of North Korea's own anti-Christian policies and onto the actions of these men. That's a misplaced perspective.
The North Korean Constitution guarantees religious freedom, so if charges are officially announced, Christians are often falsely accused of spying or committing crimes against the state.
It should not be possible to claim both that there's freedom of religion in North Korea and that these men did something deceitful. What they did was very basic, which was the sharing of their faith.
Still unclear is the kind of punishment Kim Jong-un will face. He said he agreed to hold the press conference because he wanted his family to know he was okay. And while Kenneth Bae is reportedly ill, he continues to serve a 15-year sentence in a North Korean labor camp. Still unknown is the status of Australian John Short. Are these missionary arrests indicative of a new wave of persecution?
This is not a new war on Christians. This is simply the West being able to see what North Korean underground Christians have always known, which is that the Christian faith is not welcome in any form in North Korea. They have demonstrated once again that there is no backdoor for the gospel into North Korea. The only way the gospel can advance is at great personal cost. And so let's pray that God finds them faithful at this point in their imprisonment.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
Up next, meet a young man who read the entire Quran by the time he was only 6 years old, and hear how a series of dreams led the Muslim to become a Christian.
Nabil Qureshi grew up in a devout Muslim home in the United States, and by the time he was 6 years old, he had read the entire Quran and prayed 5 times a day. But in college, he began debating a Christian friend about Islam and Christianity.
After 3 years, Nabil realized the gospel was true and Islam was not. In his book, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, Nabil describes his dramatic quest for the truth. Recently, Christian World News anchor Wendy Griffith spoke with him about his journey.
You grew up in a loving, devout Muslim home with parents who adored you. And what did your Muslim faith mean to you as a child?
It was everything. It was my identity. It was what we loved. It was our culture. It was our community. Islam isn't just something that Muslims believe. It's who they are. And so to understand the Muslim mindset, when you're talking about Islam, they think you're talking about them. And it's important for us to realize that when we interact with Muslims and our Muslim neighbors, we should show the love of Christ, remembering that this is all brand new to them.
Now, when you were in college, you had a relationship with someone named David that really was very profound. Tell us about that.
Well, you know, as a Muslim, I would challenge Christians all the time. I would challenge them that the Bible had been changed, that Jesus never claimed to be God, and that Christianity, in worshiping God as a Trinity, was actually a polytheist faith. So these are things I had been taught as a young Muslim, and I challenged David. But David was the first Christian out of hundreds I'd spoken to who was ready with the response.
Unbelievable. Well, when did it first dawn on you, Nabil, that everything that you'd believed, everything that you'd been taught since a youngster was a lie?
Well, it was when I was investigating the evidence for Christianity, which stands in contradistinction to the evidence for Islam. Because if Jesus claimed to be God and died on the cross, that not just proves Christianity, it disproves teachings from the Quran. And when I saw that the evidence was strong and that the evidence for Islam was weak and lacking, that brought me to my knees to ask God who he really was.
Was there a book that you read or something that the light bulb just went off?
You know, it took years, Wendy. I mean, this was a very, very long process. It was the relationship with David where we could really talk about these things openly and keep coming back to them time after time. And we got angry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I bet
you
got angry at first, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was times where we said, we're never going to talk about this again. And then like 5 minutes later, he'd say, Nabil, I need to ride home. And so we would just talk about it. And so that relationship is what got us to continue talking about the gospel. Who is Jesus? If he is God, that changes everything. And so I came before God and asked him directly, I don't know who you are anymore. Can you just tell me who you are? And Muslims often ask God for dreams to guide them, and so I did as well. Right. And God gave me a vision and 3 dreams that led me to Christ.
Well, tell us about one of these dreams that God gave you.
I was standing at the threshold of a narrow door. This door was just wide enough to fit me and just tall enough to fit me. I mean, it was a very powerful image in this dream, how narrow this door was. And beyond the door was a room which had a feast going on. And I knew that in that room was the feast of heaven. But it hadn't started yet. People were waiting, as if for someone to start the event.
Right.
And I wanted to get in the room, but I couldn't because my friend David was at the threshold. And I looked at him, and he was kind of blocking it, and I said, David, I thought we were going to eat together. And he said, you haven't responded. And in the dream, I knew that I needed to respond to his invitation to get into heaven. But here's where it gets crazy. When I woke up, I called the real David, and I said, David, can you tell me what this dream means? He says, it's so clear, I don't need to interpret it, which is what I had asked from God. I said, what do you mean? He said, go to Luke chapter 13. I saw in big, bold letters the words, the narrow door. And as I read it, it was basically saying that Jesus was going through the towns and villages preaching the good news. And the disciples asked, Lord, are many going to be saved? And he said, make every effort to enter through that narrow door. Because many, I tell you, will try, and few will be able. And you will see people sitting inside at the feast of the kingdom of heaven. Make every effort to enter before the owner comes and closes that door, or you'll be weeping and gnashing your teeth. God gave me a dream where he placed me in the center of a biblical parable, telling me exactly where I was in my life.
That is powerful. Well, how did your conversion affect your Muslim family?
It was devastating. It was devastating. We have a small family, just my sister and I and my parents. And as the only son in the family, I kind of carried the honor for our family in the next generation. And becoming a Christian was about the worst thing I could do to my family's honor. So it wasn't just a decision I was making that affected me, it affected the whole family. And when a Muslim comes to Christ, there's much, much that he has to consider giving up.
Well, you've got a terrific new book out called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, and it's available wherever books are sold. So be sure to get a copy of this. This is a powerful book. Nabil, God bless you.
Thanks
so much
Wendy.
for being with us.
Finally, a former chef says she's able to put food on her table because of a food pantry supported by Operation Blessing.
After an accident ended Karen's career of preparing food for others, she was struggling to make enough money to support her family. She turned to Big Reach Center for Hope, a food pantry in her community. Today, Karen regularly volunteers at the pantry and even helped to reorganize the distributions to make them more efficient. Operation Blessing has worked with Big Reach for more than 8 years. They deliver groceries and other household items to about 1,000 families every single month.
And the smiles on her face and her friends' faces
Beautiful,
say it all.
beautiful.
Praise God for
Indeed.
that. Well, that's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
We'd love to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a marvelous Monday, everybody.